Hi folks, in today's episode I'm going to be explaining a Marxist theory of crime. I'm going to begin by giving a brief overview of a Marxist theory of society, then I'm going to give 4 ways in which Marxists explain crime. Tom from sociologytutor.com here. In the description below I've given a link to my essay planning guide, how to structure your paragraphs. It's free to download. If you want more free resources, sign up to my mailing list at sociologytutor.com. I send out some free stuff 2 to 3 times a month. Let's get started. Marxism is a structural theory. Structural theories tend to take a top-down view of society. They believe individuals are strongly shaped and constrained, which means limited, by the social structure in society. Furthermore, Marxism is a structural conflict theory. Now, structural conflict theories argue that there is a conflict between competing groups. There's a powerful group in society that use their control of institutions to control and oppress the powerless. So Marxism is a structural conflict theory. So from a Marxist perspective, in a capitalist society, the one we live in, the competition is between the bourgeoisie, the business owners, the groups that control the means of creating wealth in society, and the proletariat, the workers, the people who aren't a member of the bourgeoisie. They have to sell their time to them. And the conflict between those groups is that the bourgeoisie, the business owner, wants profit and to maximise their wealth, and the proletariat, the workers, want to improve their conditions, improve their wages, and the two are, in conflict with one another. Remember, from a Marxist perspective, the bourgeoisie are exploiting the proletariat. They don't pay them the true value of their labour, and the role of institutions is to hide that really from the workers and to distort their understanding of what society is actually like, what the capitalist system is truly based on. So whenever you're thinking about any institution, but particularly when you're thinking about crime in this episode, ask yourself a couple of questions. The first one is, how does this help the bourgeoisie exploit the proletariat? How does it help them create more wealth for the bourgeoisie and limit the rights and power of the proletariat? Secondly, how does the way the police enforce the law and the legal system hide the inequality of the capitalist system from the proletariat and society generally? Not only how does it hide it, but how does it legitimise and justify the position of the ruling class? Point 1. The laws that are made in a capitalist society benefit the ruling class. That the law is created by the ruling class to protect their interests and make sure that businesses can continue to make profits and workers can be exploited. For example, the health and safety laws which are used to regulate workers and to protect workers at work are very, very weak, and they're rarely used to actually prosecute business owners who are breaking them. In 2007, the government passed a law called corporate manslaughter. This law was designed to prevent people taking advantage of workers by being lax and cutting corners with health and safety. First 15 years of the law being introduced, there are only 25 convictions under this law. This is despite the fact that the government's official stats show 166 people die at work each year. So corporate manslaughter, a law designed to protect workers, is very, very rarely used. When it is used, it produces very, very small sentences. So for example, a young man died, he was working for a scaffolding company. The boss of the scaffolding company decided to carry on with a project that he didn't have the expertise for, he didn't know the health and safety regulations, and a person fell and died. He was given a 12-week suspended prison sentence, which means you don't actually go to prison. He was ordered to pay a £1,000 fine, so he didn't go to prison, even though he pled guilty to ignoring or not following the health and safety regulations. The key sociologist here is Snyder, and he argues that the capitalist system doesn't pass laws which prevent companies from generating a profit, and therefore it ensures that workers aren't protected, because to protect workers costs money, it undermines profit. The second point Marxists make about crime is that the crimes of the bourgeoisie and the middle classes are much more harmful to society and cost far more than street crime. In 2005, government official statistics showed there were 765 murders in the UK, and that 213 people died in work-related deaths. So on the face of it, it seems like street crime, crimes that aren't committed by the capitalist classes as often, are more harmful to society, that you're more likely to be murdered. However, Sociologists Toombs and Wyatt say the official stats that are used for work-related deaths grossly underestimate the amount of deaths that are caused at work and are caused by companies not following health and safety regulations. This is another example you can use on the course to highlight how official stats don't represent the true figure of crime. Toombs and Wyatt say the true level of work-related deaths is 80% higher than the government official stats, which put work-related deaths at around 160 to 200 each year. For example, Toombs and Wyatt found if a member of the public is killed in a work-related accident, those deaths aren't included. So for example, if an object fell on a passerby and health and safety rules hadn't been followed, that death wouldn't have been recorded as a work-related death, but it comes from that set of statistics. Toombs and Wyatt's own analysis of work-related deaths showed that there was around 13 or 1400 in 2005, so significantly higher than the 800 or so people who were murdered. I've put a link to Toombs and Wyatt's study in the description below, but what it shows is that crimes committed by business owners, the bourgeoisie, are far more harmful in terms of deaths and serious injuries. Another way in which these crimes are more harmful is that financial crimes committed by the middle classes, by the bourgeoisie, are far more financially costly to society than street crime. In the 1980s, Robert Maxwell, who was a media boss, a big business owner, stole 460 million from the pension pot of one of his newspapers. That money then disappeared and the government was forced to bail out the pension pot. The pensioners, ordinary workers who'd invested in their pension scheme, were compensated, but they were only given 50% of their pensions, so that they lost a massive amount of their pensions. So that crime, a single crime alone, was 460 million. If we compare that to the cost of the 2011 London riots, the estimated cost of clearing that up was 300 million. So we can see, even the most major acts of street crime, of civil unrest, are less costly than just one financial crime. From this perspective, the crimes of the ruling class are much more harmful to society in terms of murders, serious harm, and in terms of the financial cost, but they aren't policed as heavily. The third point Marxists make about crime is it's selectively enforced, and this performs an ideological function. What I mean by this is the way in which the law is policed provides a set of ideas and norms and values and understanding of crime in society that maintains the capitalist system and it justifies its existence. Crime performs an ideological function. It shapes our ideas about who is criminal and how they should be treated, and it hides from us the disadvantage and the actual causes of crime. David Gordon is the key theorist here, and he says it does this in two ways. The first way in which it does this is prison hides some of the working class community, the people who have been most let down by society, people who have been marginalised and disadvantaged and have therefore turned to crime. By hiding them away from society, people don't question how these people have ended up in the situation they're in and why they're committing crime. And therefore, the wider public doesn't question the capitalist system. By keeping them hidden in prison, people don't question why the capitalist system creates the conditions in which people commit crime and the exploitation that they're likely to have experienced to get there. The second way in which it does this is by focusing on working class crime, by focusing on street crime. So the police vigorously and publicly enforce street crime and ignore white collar crime, crimes committed by the middle classes and the bourgeoisie. This gives an impression to the wider public that crime is essentially a working class phenomenon, that it's really just the working classes who commit crime. This is backed up by the media with programmes like Street Cops, which of course focus on those types of crime. And what this does is perform that ideological function where the wider public starts associating crime with the working class, and it hides the crimes of the middle classes and of the bourgeoisie. The final point Marxists make about crime is that capitalism and a capitalist society is crimogenic. This simply means that it actually generates crime. It creates the conditions which will lead to crime. Now, again, the key theorist here is David Gordon, and he says it does this in a number of ways. Firstly, capitalism is a system in which people are encouraged to be incredibly individualistic, that an anything goes attitude exists where people pursue their own individual needs above all else. He calls it a dog-eat-dog society where we are pushed to compete with one another in our daily lives, but obviously in a business environment too. So this constant drive and this constant environment of competition, individualism, etc. creates an environment in which breaking the odd law or breaking the rules seems like a very small problem, seems like something that people see as acceptable if it's about getting them ahead, thinking of the individual. So capitalism creates this extreme individualism in which breaking laws which may harm society is not seen as necessarily a bad thing. The second way in which capitalism is crimogenic is it turns us all into consumers. What we mean by this is we construct our identity out of what we buy and what we own. Capitalism also tells us that to be a success in society means to have a high degree of material wealth, to own lots of nice possessions. And in such an environment, if you don't have a legitimate means of generating that wealth through work or employment, then you're likely to turn to illegitimate means, you're likely to turn to crime. So in this sense, Marxism is very similar to Merton's strain theory, that the American dream is what Merton talks about, but the ideal life is dangled in our face by advertising, and we're told this is what success looks like. And if you can't achieve that, then obviously you're going to be frustrated and you might turn to criminal activity to achieve that. The third way in which capitalism is crimogenic, in which that it generates crime, is that it simply creates a very unequal society. Many capitalist societies are highly unequal, but the people at the bottom of society can still see the wealth and the richness of the people at the top of society. Now, that is obviously going to create status frustration and anger, and that may lead to crimes which don't necessarily have a material goal, for example, vandalism, and that anger and aggression may lead to violence as well. So from a Marxist perspective, the capitalist system is crimogenic. It generates the causes and conditions which are going to lead to crime. It creates crime itself. Now, before you go, bonus point: bourgeoisie, the business owners, the middle classes can better negotiate the criminal justice system. There isn't equality before the law. Obviously, the wealthier you are, the better your lawyer is likely to be if you end up in court, the easier it's going to be for you to manipulate the system. So again, the system works in a way which disadvantages the working classes and advantages the bourgeoisie, the ruling class business owners. I've done a separate video on the evaluations of the Marxist perspective on crime, so I'll put a link in the description. Take care, bye for now.